The cloister walk wakes like a rumor on tiptoe, so you set the horn lamp on the chapter house bench until a warm coin of light lands where stone and conscience share the same echo. The south wall that should be blank turns out to be a door with a polite latch. The door opens into a lane that curves behind the choir like a sentence with its subject removed. And in that lane, by miracle of rents, loopholes, and clerical liberties, a row of quiet houses breathe in a rhythm the psalter never learned. On one lintel hangs a lamp the color of pomegranate. On another, a little broom tied with ribbon. In a window, a sampler that looks like a blessing and is a price list in silk. This is not fiction. This is a city's arrangement with appetite, tucked behind church walls where bishops own immunity and bailiffs tread lighter than they should. You lay your palm on the jamb as if oak could borrow your pulse. Then you hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise themselves before mouths can pretend this is simply weather. Rate posted, door bolted, witness heard, copies given, no minors, no force, clean linen, water allowed. Thanks collected. The beadle's daughter scans the card, sets the beadle on the bench, and nods. The sacristan exhales as if the choir just learned a new note. The house mistress, call her Magda, because names are cheaper than silence, ties her keys to her girdle like a hymn that finally trusted would. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that brings you drills and daylight, not sermons that pretend not to rent. In the comments, add your 7-word rule you'd actually nail to a discreet lintel. Rate posted, no minors, no force, water allowed. I'll pin the strongest ones and carry them to the next liberty, where ink outvotes incense. You begin with rent, because hypocrisy does. The houses stand on land that answers to the bishop's seal, not the mayor's staff. Fines fall softer here, and so do morals. A canon who calls himself prudent collects leases at the chapter table. A bailiff who calls himself practical keeps watch for riot, not justice. You set the horn on the roll of rents until the coin of light stains his fingers. Rate posted goes on each lintel, where wrists must brush it before coin mistakes itself for sacrament. Magda pins her prices, room by the hour, wine by the cup, bath by the tub, linen by the change, so bargaining cannot hire blows. The beadle's daughter chalks no minors in letters large enough to bruise a bishop. A lad standing in shadow reads the card and leaves angry at his own decade. Good, a woman who has already lived too many stories longer than she planned, reads the same line and kisses her thumb. The guild of house mistresses is older than their enemies think. They run baths, not parades. They keep keys, not tails. They buy quiet, not indulgences. You hang a second card inside, where hands will bump it at the latch. Door bolted, water allowed, clean linen, no force. Magda touches each word with 2 fingers like a prayer for wrists. A client with more ring than sense twitches at no force and discovers the door will remain closed to him forever if he argues. He stares at the horn coin on the card and chooses adulthood. The house earns thanks on your slate by refusing coin that would tax lungs later. The friar who preaches Lenten thunder and collects Advent rents drifts into the lane pretending to count gutters. You nail witness heard. Copies given to the chapter bench beside his seat and watch his mouth learn quiet. When a house wants to throw out a constable's drunk cousin, she does not need a miracle. She needs witness heard in a room where saints and sentences share air. The sacristan, who knows how many pews hold whose names, likes pointing to wood more than pleading with cousins. You are building him a habit he can keep when you leave. Bawds keep books, you teach them ledgers. Magda adds a page called Thanks, bread for widows at the gate, broth for a fevered girl, linen for the infirmary, candles moved back a cart length on feast nights. She pins the page under horn at the porch because daylight breeds mercy faster than incense does. The priest reads banns and then thanks, smaller in the correct way, and the porch applauds the page that pays soup. In cities that hate their own hunger, this is the only applause worth anything. Consent does not grow where price is secret. You hang a small card beside the bed curtains where hands must brush it. No force, no drink bought by threat. Say stop, say again. The girl with the sampler in the window runs a finger along the words every time she unties a client's purse string. If the purse runs out first, the The card cancels poetry. A sullen man with saints sewn into his sleeve discovers that Say Stop works here, and not only indoors. He leaves a coin under, thanks for a rule that guarded him, then lights one candle for the one he wishes he'd had 6 years ago. You will never know his name. Your wood survived him without needing it. Liberties breed disease when linen is an afterthought. You hang clean linen at mouth height and make the guild of house mistresses add water to budgets. Baths that smell of rosemary replace odors that taught snickering as a catechism. Cups of wine get measured instead of poured like absolution. The bucket in the corner has water allowed pinned above it because thirst should not have to argue with entertainment. The surgeon, who keeps hot bowls and late nights for blacksmiths, shows Magda how to burn linen the way covenants are burned, with witnesses, lists, and no poetry. Gossip markets break faces. You tax them into markets you can survive. Slander fined goes on the lane's rail, and the alehouse beams nearby get no slander on tap. Song sellers drop their sharpest verses and discover harvest jigs pay better. A taverner who once sold confession wine now sells thanks. A small coin for the widow, a clean cloth for the bathhouse, because the porch claps for lists, not for legends. You are changing a century not with morals but with rate boards. No river is innocent. Neither is any cucking stool. The beadle with a taste for dunking arranges a lesson for scolds at the bridge to entertain pilgrims. You hang no dunking before reading on the yoke and witness heard at the ladder. Water allowed sits on the rail with the dipper. 2 women who came to buy drama hear a list instead. Who spoke, who didn't, who owed, who paid, and decide stew tastes more just than applause. The stool learns punctuation. The river breathes better. The boys tap the crosspiece with the beadle when they say enough. Procurement returns dressed as piety. The chapter steward proposes closing houses during Lent, on paper for heaven, in practice for tighter profit. You set horn on his ledger until ink looks ashamed. Door bolted hangs inside. No force bruises wrists that mistake hunger for sanction. Witness heard promises to count complaints without interest. He reads the cards aloud to his own knuckles and finds himself relieved. He closes nothing. He posts thanks instead. A novice with bright eyes and love of saints wanders where she should not and starts to say rescue. You hand her a broom, a basin, and the rule scroll children can shout. Rate posted, door bolted, witness heard, copies given. She scrubs, listens, copies. Rescue that cannot carry water is not rescue. You buy her 3 dinners to cover the lesson she thought she would teach someone else. She leaves with a folded card and a look meant for tomorrow. The worst violence is always the quiet kind. A constable's cousin tries to pay half and push twice. The door stays bolted because no force is pinned where hands live. A bishop's man asks whether the card applies to him. The sacristan smiles as if talking to a saint, sticky with child's sugar and points. No minors. The bishop's man learns to like doors that say no with such sweet handwriting. You make a book for the lane the way you made one for Burns. It is not a roll of shame. It is a ledger of verbs. Who asked, who refused, who read, who copied, who stopped. The house mistresses sign thanks next to the constable who stopped noise without hiring the stocks. The beadle's daughter posts copies given beside names that would have been myth. The clerk adds retracted to charges people wrote when their hunger was trying to make rent. The book begins to look like a shepherd's tally. Faces kept safe, stories not purchased with skin. Confession becomes useful when it touches wood. The friar performs Lenten thunder, then reads rate posted without grimacing. He pins no anonymous posting to the porch where bands live. He adds names learned into his own psalm book because anonymity pays worse than sin. He is smaller in the correct way. He buys a wreath for the infirmary door and stops pretending the herb wall is impious. A duke arrives with curiosities bundled in velvet, and a poet who wants to audition the word vice at your expense. You hand them the beadle's beetle and a brush. No slander on tap makes them wash their laughter off the alehouse beam. Thanks makes them purchase stew for women who preferred quiet over legend. The poet writes a harvest jig instead. The duke blinks into a decent mood and pays rent for a latch repaired. You learn to accept nobles as weather. Mid-lintel, now it's your turn. Type in the comments the 7-word lane rule you would nail, where your wrist will hit it, before your mouth invents chivalry. Rate posted, door bolted, no minors, no force. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 2 reaches you, before a different porch discovers how expensive silence can be. You close the day the correct way, with lists. The beadle's daughter reads thanks under horn at the porch. The house mistresses count clean linens. The surgeon warms one bowl and hopes not to use it. The sacristan writes names learned where bands used to sit alone. The clerk files copies given where rumors will go bankrupt trying to reproduce. The priest, delighted by a smaller voice, blesses a broom. Behind church walls, the church remembers it is also a roof, and you leave what you always leave, sentences where wrists live. Over the lane, rate posted, door bolted, witness heard, copies given, no minors, no force, water allowed. On the porch, no anonymous posting, complaint without fee, names learned. On the beadle's bench, slander fined. In the gale, time posted. On the guild rail, thanks collected. On the steal me shelf, horn, cards, nails, wreaths, scrolls. Behind church walls that thought they were only piety, you made places that practice safety instead of selling secrecy. Nobody expects applause. Everybody prefers stew. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 2 lands before a chapter clerk tries to staple fasting to rent. In the comments, tell me the 7-word lintel law you will actually hammer in your city. Rate posted, no minors, no force, water allowed, and say continue if you want to step deeper into the liberty, the bishop's rent book where discretion taxes bodies, the beadle's fines that learn to behave, the guild sisters who buy baths with ledgers, and the women who turned a doorway into a door. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the only miracle that has worked in every story you've trusted me with. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths pretend they do not know. The bishop's rent book pretends to be weather, so you set the horn lamp on the chapter table until a warm coin of light lands where quills usually congratulate themselves. The vellum opens to columns that like to forget their subjects. Houses enumerated as liberties, dues summarized as custom, every third line an invented fee called quietus that means we do not see what we charge for seeing. You hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise before ink can call itself Providence, rent posted, no minors, no force, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given, thanks collected. The sacristan's sigh sounds like a choir resting between psalms. Magda reads each line aloud the way people read charms at doorways, then taps the page with a knuckle that has paid in 3 currencies already. Coin, breath, patience. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that brings you daylight drills, not invisible taxes. And in the comments, write the 7-word rent rule you'd nail to any chapter bench. Rent posted, no minors, no force, copies given. I'll pin the strongest and carry them to the next porch where coin has outgrown secrecy. You begin where debt always hides, the margin. The clerk's tidy Latin calls increases augmentationies and fines correctionies. You slide the horn's coin across the words until they look as nervous as their author. Rent posted goes up on the pillar by the chapter steps. Magda pins her copy under horn at the porch. 2 other keepers do the same because practical women like not having to argue about arithmetic before they argue about anything else. The canon who likes the phrase for the dignity of the place tries it on again. Complaint without fee waits for him at the corner of the ledger like a hand held out without sarcasm. He stops talking. You are teaching men to enjoy pointing. The beadle brings his fines book with the old appetite for performing. Egg on a door, a groat, slur on a beam, scrub the beam, red hue at the bridge, dip until enough, stone at a face, gale, knife, no market. You tack slander find on his bench, and he finds he likes that phrase more than all his cuffs put together. Witness heard, he reads in a surprised voice when a merchant's boy accuses Magda's maid of theft. 2 market women say otherwise. The boy's master apologizes, pays the missed hour, and pins thanks on the porch. The beadle rearranges his eyebrows into something like respect. He enjoys becoming furniture, guild sisters. The laundresses and bath-keepers, who have held civilization together with hot water since before cities learned to lisp, arrive with ledgers that smell of lye and rosemary. You hang clean linen, water allowed at mouth height in their doorway, and watch them write thanks when men who boasted of sin yesterday pay for baths before tails today. The sisters bring a small marvel, a shelf of bottled vinegar scented with mint, priced by ladle. Magda buys 2, the surgeon buys 4. The sacristan buys 1 for incense spills, which is to say for kindness. It pleases you when sanctity enjoys hygiene. Behind church walls, virtue tries to subcontract. A canon's procurator suggests purity rounds, posted closings on vigils, a surcharge labeled fiscus sacer. You press the horn coin onto his paper until the gold flees the idea. Door bolted remains an indoor prerogative. No force remains nailed low where hands cannot forget it. Witness heard remains the method for the few nights it goes wrong. He rolls up his Latin and sulks into ordinary. You sell him a wreath for the infirmary door to console him. Saints like productive sulking. Rescue arrives with banners, which is how you know to mistrust it. A knight-errant and 2 eager clerks drape a cloth that says Jubilee Purification and propose cleansing the lane by marching every woman to confession inside the choir. You hold the horn lamp steady until their rhetoric remembers gravity. No minors stops their opening flourish. No force cancels the march. Complaint without fee moves the conversation to the bench. Witness heard invites Magda, 2 bath-keepers, and the sacristan. One clerk leaves with a face redder than his rubric. The knight buys water by the bucket and feels virtuous for reasons you can live with. Shame hired the stool last market. You fight back by making ritual earnest. No dunking before reading hangs on the bridge. In letters even pride can sound out. Water allowed sits on the rail with a dipper boys can escort. Witness heard lives at the ladder where hands have to touch it before they can grip. A scold summons audience. The constable points to the card. The story turns into a list. Who shouted, who sold, who paid, who apologized. The scold nods, pays the onion, and chooses stew. The river is less employed. Its dignity is a kind of grace you prefer. Rumor dresses itself in piety every Saturday. Handbills pretending to be prayer lists slide under doors like mice. You answer with paper heavier than adjectives. No anonymous posting is now stapled to the band's board like an extra beatitude. Charge copied sits on the clerk's table like bread. Names learned turns courage into attendance. Copies given sends women home with paper instead of posture. The priest reads banns in a key that lets wood share the voice. He seems younger, not more modern, merely glad not to have to be a trumpet. Economy becomes hygiene the day the bathhouse ledger overtakes the pillory minutes. Thanks collected posts under horn with names and verbs. Steam kept, linen boiled, vinegar ladled, no minors asked, door bolted, witness heard. People clap once in the measure of lids when the list is read. The rhymers steal the list and set it to a jig. Coins fall without requiring anyone to be injured. You like art best when it is paid by gratitude. The lane invents a scar book of its own, not for boasting, for prevention. Where? Threshold. When? Second cup. Why? Threat. Door bolted. Response. Witness heard. Later. Bread for the guard. Water for the frightened. Thanks. Magda. Gently. A traveler from Bruges copies the form and offers to rescue someone by marriage. Magda smiles at him like a mother and gives him a cup of wine measured the correct way, then sells him a card for his own sisters. Rescue that cannot keep a ledger is not rescue. He buys a pen. A bishop's canon visits with a personal temptation, a licencia for a foreign dignitary to entertain without city interference. You set horn on the parchment and run your finger along the only line that still matters. No minors. No force. He blinks, then thanks you. The dignitary hears of the rule, grumbles, respects the door that says no, pays the posted rate, and drops coin into Bomex. Thanks in a gesture that looks more civic than erotic. You will never become a romantic about vice, but you can nourish your respect for persons. Mid-lintel, it's your turn again. In the comments, write the 7-word porch rule you would nail where prayer and rent share air. Rent posted, no minors, no force, witness heard. Subscribe and tap the bell so the next part lands before a steward decides to pretend fasting means fundraising. The hospital chapel borrows your grammar and becomes beautiful. Clean linen hangs beside the reliquary. Water allowed glows above the basin. Thanks collected lives on a little board where the infirmary keeper writes steam paid, bed turned, broth given, comb offered. He never uses nouns like body. He uses hands, feet, mouths, names. The friars copy the list into their own minute book and claim they invented it. Good theft is still worship. Law that will not bend decides to live in you anyway. The Gale door reads time posted aloud. 2 wives arrive when chalk promised. One brings stew, one brings a copy. The keeper raps no ordeal talk with his knuckle when a cousin suggests 1 extra night for caution. Rent does not get to masquerade as sanctity anymore. The keeper has discovered that pointing pays better. The Liberty has a neighbor who is still learning. A second lane across a narrower cloister tries to compete with cheaper rates and fewer rules. You take the horn there the way constellations shift without anger. Rate posted goes up. No minors. No force follow. Door bolted finds a latch that behaved like a hinge until today. 2 house mistresses ask to merge their thanks pages and their bath ledgers. Competition learns to enjoy becoming cooperation. The chapter steward signs both rents with the same hand. He is smaller in the correct way. Crisis attempts a hymn at dusk. A pilgrim cart spills in the lane. A boy falls. A braggart tries to make rescue into theater. You hold him with wood. Witness heard. Water allowed. Door bolted to keep strangers from inventing a vigil without permission. The surgeon warms 1 bowl. The herb wife lifts vinegar like a chalice. The beadle keeps the handbill hawker's back. The sacristan brings bread. Someone starts to sing. Magda shakes her head and says later, not now, in the tone that has replaced 10 sermons. The boy breathes. The lane applauds the carved sentences, not the mouths. The steward opens thanks and writes bread, steam, silence. Stories that wanted to become biography settle for becoming policy. The knight-errant returns without a banner and spends an hour leaning against the rail like a decent fence. He buys a wreath for the infirmary door and fills the vinegar measure without being asked. The clerk orders extra copies of no anonymous posting because rival parishes have begun to steal them in batches. The priest, grinning, draws a tiny beetle in the corner of the band's book. Saints love jokes they do not have to explain. You finish the day the way a city lives, by posting sentences where wrists must agree before mouths can ask. On the porch, no anonymous posting, complaint without fee, names learned, copies given. On the rail, slander fined. On the lintel, rate posted, no minors, no force, door bolted, water allowed. At the bench, witness heard. On the bathhouse wall, clean linen. In the hospital chapel, thanks collected. Behind church walls, the church is finally also a roof. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 3 lands before some canon learns to spell augmentation in thicker ink. In the comments, leave your 7-word liberty rule. You truly will hammer where hands live, rate posted, no minors, no force, witness heard, and type. Continue if you want to step deeper into this quarter. The bishop's back room where quietus taxes breath, the guild sisters' bath ledgers that made saints love towels, the beadle's fines when jealous poets arrive, and the women who learn to turn a door into a door. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the quiet tool that keeps winning. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them, before mouths call darkness custom. The back room where quietus gets inked has no saints on the walls, so you set the horn lamp on the rent chest until a warm coin of light lands where discretionary fees pretend they were blessed at birth. The canon's procurator keeps a tidy knife for cutting seals and a messier one for cutting corners. The clerk has a smile like dry parchment. The sacristan looks as if he would rather count candle drips than throats. You hang counsel at mouth height on the cupboard door where wrists must bruise before quills extract penance. Rent posted, no minors, no force, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given, no quietus without reason, thanks collected. Magda comes in with 3 women from 2 houses and the bath ledgers under her arm. They all touch the card as if palms could vote. The canon's man tries custom like a key. The card refuses to turn. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that keeps our lamp fueled instead of fine print. And in the comments, write the 7 words you would nail over any rent chest that learned to purr. Rent posted. No minors, no force, copies given. I'll pin the best and walk them into the next chapter house where discretion taxes breath. You begin by reading the ledger aloud because sound embarrasses theft. The clerk recites, St. John's Liberty, 4 houses, rent regular, augmentation for feast, quietus for quiet. You slide the horn's coin onto quietus until the word becomes a puddle. For what? You ask. He says sweeping, but the beadle's daughter already paid the beadle for sweeping. He says protection, but witness heard means doors keep their own courage. He says custom, and the sacristan accidentally laughs. No quietus without reason goes onto the door with a nail that squeals in a key the porch will enjoy. The procurator swallows. He reads the posted rent like a man relieved to be furniture. Magda signs a receipt that does not pretend to be sacrament. Paper behaves. The bailiff who collects fines on festival nights tries to renegotiate dignity. He whispers that the lane makes disorder. You point to the bathhouse ledger. The sisters wrote steam kept, linen boiled, vinegar ladled, cups measured, doors bolted, no minors obeyed. They hold out a second ledger labeled thanks, many names strong. The bailiff reads it as if the alphabet had turned wholesome. He finds 2 poets for slander and discovers he prefers punishing adjectives to diverting eggs. The lane applauds with bowls. The poets add a verse about posted rates that inexplicably slaps. Bath ledgers turn into doctrine when read at the porch. The priest pins clean linen next to names learned and perfects a new rhythm. Bands, thanks, steam. 2 guild sisters present a little board titled Vigil Etiquette. Door bolted, water allowed, cups measured, no talk paid, witness heard. They hold it chest high, where hands must touch before mouths spend what benches scrub. The sacristan blesses it because he can smell rosemary. Theology retreats gracefully before arithmetic and towels. Charity comes with a finger in the purse. You keep it out by lending lists. The friars propose a public purification that would empty the lane for prayer, which is to say for scarcity. You carry the horn to their refectory and hang counsel at mouth height. No closures without reason. Rent posted, thanks collected, witness heard. The prior, who has become smaller in the good way, looks at the card like daylight arriving under the door and nods. The lane stays open. The baths stay hot. The bowl in the infirmary is paid by saints who discovered they like vinegar. The Beatles' fines book used to be a gallery. You revise it into plumbing. Slander fine turns insults into mops. No bricks keeps faces off walls. Egg at a face becomes money and scrubbing. Knife goes to charge, not theater. He posts the table on his bench in letters that bump knuckles. He sells 2 copies to neighboring beadles who want their wrists to enjoy pointing. After dusk, he entertains poets by letting them write, retracted in his book themselves. The ink feels like standing up correctly. He has discovered he likes being relied upon more than he likes being feared. Behind the doors, rules remain dull in the exact degree that keeps bones unbroken. Door bolted, no force means a gauntlet cannot buy what a mouth cannot carry. Water allowed means thirst is not a wage. Rate posted means coins arrive evenly, not loudly. Copies given means memory is portable. Magda writes thanks on the slate when the Bath sisters save a girl from a fever that smelled like winter. The girl returns with bread and wipes the rail. The porched applause sounds like lids. The lane adds a tiny line to its scar book. Who read, who stopped, who brought water. There is no stanza. Good. The bishop's man tests the hinges on your grammar by purchasing a licentia for a visiting envoy to converse without hindrance. He expects a couch of Latin. He meets a card. No minors. No force bruise his glove. The envoy obeys because he has learned to prefer not being fined in towns that like their beadles. He pays the rate under horn, leaves it on the lintel for everyone to see, and drops a coin into thanks. He returns later as a pilgrim with no errands and buys only vinegar for the infirmary. Towns tame power by giving it errands. The stool wants back into the story, as stools always do. The beadle drags it near the bridge and proposes to wash a scold for edification. You set horn on the yoke and make 3 children, read no dunking, before reading aloud without laughter. They fetch water in clean cups, not buckets. They say enough by tapping the crosspiece with the beetle. The crowd watches a confession convert into a ledger. Who shouted? Who apologized? Who paid onions? The stool sulks and learns to be punctuation. The river with gratitude goes back to being weather. Gossip detours through piety when it cannot buy applause. A chapter clerk slides an anonymous bill under bans. No anonymous posting bites his fingers. The priest hands him pen and charge copied. He writes his name and cannot finish the libel. He scrubs the post, signs for the lesson, and buys a wreath for the infirmary door. The porch smiles at the evolution of a habit. All that ritual ever needed was wood. The lane's economics become hygienic when the Bath sisters tie their ledger to their door at chest height. Steam kept, linen boiled, vinegar ladled, no minors, door bolted, witness heard, thanks collected. Men who once purchased myths purchase towels. Women who once surrendered names write them at the top of thanks next to bowls of water. The guild clerk, feeling health in his fingers, adds a new page to the city ledger titled Miracles Prevented. It lists rooms that did not become songs. Rescue returns wearing a new sash. A knight leads a procession and suggests marrying 2 women to save their souls. You put horn on his vow the way you set iron on an anvil. No force, no minors remains the hinge. Witness heard invites the women, the Bath sisters, the sacristan. The knight manages to become useful by carrying vinegar to the infirmary. That is how you save chivalry from itself. Give it errands or shut its doors. Some houses claim they cannot post rates because discretion is part of the price. You give them a shorter sign, no surprises. The phrase pays in fewer bruises and more breakfasts. The steward, who now prides himself on loving lists, makes a bold addition: no quietus charged without ledger entry. It hurts nobody and embarrasses everyone properly. Quills discover that Latin cannot explain theft after a town learns to love spelling mid-lintel, now you. Type your 7-word porch law that keeps rents from pretending to be saints. Rent posted, no minors, no force, witness heard. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 4 lands before Advent choruses try to make fines taste holy. The hospital chapel adopts your meter and looks better for it. Clean linen above the bed, water allowed on the bucket, thanks collected on a peg where names kneel, honey allowed on Sundays beside the comfrey trough, no ordeal talk above the confession stool. The prior and the surgeon compete for the honor of being smaller. They both win. Saints only require visibility to cooperate. The guild holds inquiry with a new appetite to publish gratitude. Thanks is read first, then charges, then returns paid. A baker who misweighed pays back coin and receives stew before story. A co-opper who sold a sour barrel returns pitch and writes sorry in a hand that finally looks like his. A Bath sister who kept linen boiled gets a basket of rosemary. The porch applauds receipts. The poets steal the list and produce a dull song that still pays. The Beatles' fines shrink into plumbing entirely. He raps slander fined like a craftsman tapping a joint. His bench becomes the place people settle the cost of words while they still have names. The Beatle sleeps more and drinks less. Towns that want fewer tragedies must learn to nap. You end the day posting what made all this tolerable. On the chapter steps, rent posted, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given. On the lane rail, slander fined. On each lintel, no minors, no force, door bolted, water allowed. On the bathhouse, clean linen, thanks collected. In the hospital, honey allowed. At the stool, no dunking before reading. Under the bands, no anonymous posting, names learned. Behind church walls that were built to flatter heaven, you built bedrooms that refuse to flatter violence. Nobody writes odes, everybody eats. Subscribe and tap the bell so the next step arrives before Advent candles tempt a steward to staple purity to rent. In the comments, tell me the 7-word law you will actually hammer where hands live. Rent posted, no minors, no force, witness heard, and type continue. If you want me to take you into the bishop's winter audit when custom runs out of Latin, the Bath Guild when rosemary becomes policy, the beadle when poets return, and the women who turned a townhouse into a door. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the only thing that ever worked in alleys, forges, roads, and cloisters, Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths pretend ignorance. The winter audit spreads its papers like frost over the chapter table, so you set the horn lamp at the corner until a warm coin of light lands, where custom is accustomed to breathing without witnesses. On the left, Renzo by Liberties. On the right, augmentations, corrections, and the sly quietus that has stolen more breath than incense. The sacristan uncaps a small inkwell as if it were a confession. The canon's procurator rearranges knives and smiles. Magda comes with 2 Bath sisters and the beadle's daughter, all carrying ledgers that smell of rosemary, lye, and arithmetic. You hang counsel at mouth height because nothing else in this building admits to having a mouth. Rent posted, no minors, no force. Complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given. No quietus without reason, thanks collected. The beadle's daughter raps the bench with the beetle once, soft enough to sound like hinges consenting. Paper looks nervous. Good. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that keeps our lamp burning, not the one that rings when hands are empty. And in the comments, write the 7-word audit rule you'd nail to any rent chest. Rent posted, complaint without fee, copies given, thanks. I'll pin the best and carry them to the next porch before augmentation learns a new synonym for theft. You start by making ink work for a living. The clerk reads the first liberty, 4 houses, rent regular, augmentation for feast days, quietus for peace. The horn's coin rolls to the word peace until it melts. Show your reason, you say. The procurator produces none. No quietus without reason goes on the door behind him with a nail that squeaks the way chapters hate to be corrected. He coughs and reads again. Rent regular, no augmentation, no quietus. Magda signs and pins her copy under horn at the porch. 2 housemistresses clap once in the measure of lids and return to boiling linen. The sacristan's shoulders fall a good inch. He turns to counting candle stubs with a clean conscience. The Bath sisters present their ledger as if it were a psalter anyone could learn. Steam kept, linen boiled, vinegar ladled, cups measured, doors bolted, no minors asked, witness heard, thanks collected. The steward posts their slate under horn on the porch and discovers that apportioning water by ladle teaches more theology than most sermons. He adds a line to the lily ledger he did not expect to write, honey fund open year-round. The prior, smaller on purpose, pretends he thought of it first. You congratulate his timing. The Beadle's fines book turns the lane into plumbing. Egg, groat and scrubbing. Slur, penny and scrubbing. Brick, gale, shilling, and the long consequences of other men's adjectives. Knife, charge, not theater. He reads his table to the chapter out loud, and the room adjusts itself a degree toward adulthood. He has learned to love pointing. Liberties try to borrow God at Advent. A canon proposes closing for vigils, 2 weeks without steam for heaven, which is to say for austerity lenders. You move the horn's coin so it stains his fingernails and hang your card where his ring will bruise it. No closures without reason, door bolted, water allowed, clean linen, witness heard. He folds his dignity back into his purse, and the bathhouse stays hot. The Guild sisters conclude that Advent smells better with rosemary anyway. Silence in gales is the oldest tax. You audit it like the rent it is. Time posted gets chalked on the wicket in letters 2 wives can plan around. Access for spouse keeps love schedulable. Charge copied stops hush from billing itself. No ordeal talk cancels a cousin's appetite for extra nights as caution. The keeper shows you he can read by pointing more than pleading. You give him a wreath for the door to make kindness look like policy. Justice is a slate heavy with other people's handwriting. The porch clerk stacks copies given beside ban so hands will leave with something besides outrage. He adds retracted to the board after a poet confesses his rhyme could not survive horn. He pins false over 3 anonymous bills that tried to borrow saints. The Beadle's daughter sells nails to neighboring parishes. The bishop stops flinching when nails appear near bans. Saints love low sentences. You take the audit into kitchens because Advent charms hunger into believing it is holy. No bare feet goes beside peels. Apron tied above the hearth, cool first. Cover sparks over scullery buckets. No water under oil where pans insult prudence. Women stop waiting for permission to be guild sisters of dullness. They buy comfrey wreaths and hang your cards under them like charms that reduce funerals. Magda starts an indoor thanks list. Bread for the infirmary, rosemary for baths, coin for vinegar, pinned where palms will bruise gratitude on their way out. The knight who used to sell rescue arrives without banners and requests a list of errands instead. You give him 3. Carry vinegar to the infirmary, buy lids for pitch pots, and stand at the stool with a dipper to say enough. He learns to adore chores. Chivalry that cannot carry water is a street performance. Chivalry with a payroll is a civic tool. Your lane prefers tools. Rumor tries to live in the word augmentation a little longer. The clerk recites a line about winter coal adjustment. You point to thanks collected and ask who paid for steam and light already. The sisters raise their hands. The chapter redraws the column. Thanks becomes the only winter word the town enjoys counting. Every coin that wanted to become a syllable in a ballad becomes hot water instead. The audit ends as it must by publishing the boring things that saved the city. The steward posts under horn, rent posted, no quietus without reason, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given, thanks collected. The priest copies the list into the band's margin because liturgy succeeds when rent behaves. The sacristan begins volunteering to hold the horn lamp at lanes he used to pretend not to see. The beadle sells 2 more fine tables to beadles who want to stop pretending their palms are theology. Paper finds itself manageable. Behind the chapter wall, the houses you're not supposed to name hang wreaths. Rate posted greets hands, no minors greets wrists, no force greets the dangerous part of a mouth. Door bolted and water allowed greet the part of a night that thinks it can use hunger as law. The surgeon warms 1 bowl for 3 houses. He uses it only once. He writes thanks at the bottom of his ledger and turns off your horn lamp. Outside, the Bath sisters list steam kept and vinegar ladled, and the lane claps once like lids. The bishop's rent book becomes a calendar rather than a confession. Mid-lintel, now you. Leave in the comments the 7-word audit law you will actually hammer where a quill has been behaving like weather. Rent posted, complaint without fee, copies given, thanks. Subscribe and tap the bell so part 5 lands before someone tries to rename appetite devotion. You walk the loop 1 more time because it works. Chapter steps, porch bench, beadle's rail, bathhouse door, gale wicket, infirmary wall, lane lintels. At each you thump wood or stone so the card hums and hands remember where they live. The town smells like rosemary, wax, ink, and soup, the scent of gossip's competitor. The rhymers sing jigs about towels instead of tragedies. The steward closes the lily ledger without writing in it. And then you leave what you always leave, sentences at mouth height designed to be stolen. On the steps, rent posted. On the cupboard, no quietus without reason. On the bench, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given. On the rail, slander fined. On the lintels, rate posted, no minors, no force, door bolted, water allowed. On the bathhouse, clean linen, thanks collected. On the infirmary, honey allowed. The lamp's coin of light turns vellum into furniture. That is your idea of reform. Subscribe and tap the bell so the 6th part arrives before a steward remembers how to spell augmentation with music. In the comments, drop your 7-word porch law. You will actually nail where hands live. Rent posted, no minors, no force, witness heard, and type continue if you want to follow the sisters when rosemary becomes policy, the beadle when poets return, the gale when hush tries, and the women who keep turning doors into doors. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards. And the only trick that made 7 different stories worked the same way. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths declare custom. Rosemary becomes policy the moment the Bath sisters pin a slate to their lintel, so you set the horn lamp on the doorframe until a warm coin of light lands where steam and law share the same breath. The slate lists what they have always done and what they now insist on being paid for. Water boiled, linen boiled, cups measured, rosemary steeped, door bolted, no minors, witness heard, thanks collected. Magda runs her finger down each line like a woman counting ribs and finds only bone she trusts. The sacristan smiles, the tired smile he saves for the one virtue that never humiliates him. Clean. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that fuels this lamp rather than candles that pretend to do the same work. And in the comments, give me your 7-word bath rule you would actually nail near a copper. Water boiled, linen boiled, no minors, door bolted. I'll pin the ones your wrists can obey and carry them to the next lane that wants steam to outvote secrecy. Soap is arithmetic. You walk the sisters' shelves like a guild inspector of decency, tapping rosewater, vinegar, barley lye, and salt as if they were notes rather than nouns. Cups measured and no drink bought by threat hang at mouth height where hands bump before mouths purchase courage on credit. A man who once bragged that charity begins with wine finds he prefers leaving with a ledger entry that says thanks, not a story that owes somebody rent. A pilgrim washes twice, pays twice, and does not learn the names of anyone he did not arrive with. That is the whole gospel. Poets always come back when towns get healthy. Two arrive with rhymes about liberties and lace and the price of virtue in a city that discovered soap. You set horn on their plank and nail slander fine next to rate posted. The beetle's daughter taps the booth beam with the beetle. 1 rap for verse, 2 for evidence, 3 for mop. They laugh with better manners than last quarter, switch to a jig, and discover harvest lyrics sell without bleeding anybody. After the second set, they ask the sisters to read the slate aloud into their tune. The crowd claps because the stanza sounds like policy. Hush hunts for cracks, even when a gate is shut. The gatekeeper has learned to love pointing, but the cousin who likes to supervise benches proposes holding 2 women for caution until a chapter meeting that keeps postponing itself. You carry the horn to the wicket and read the cards as if they were scripture, time posted, access for spouse, charge copied, no ordeal talk. He reddens, you nod, and he reads them out loud, discovering that the business of keeping is a trade like any other when lit well enough. Schedule, company, paper, restraint. One husband brings stew, one woman takes her copy home and pins it over her lintel. Nobody writes a ballad because the point of low sentences is that nothing has to. Rent tries again under a different perfume. The canon's procurator returns with a roll called Winter Coal Compassion, which smells like augmentation compared to the Bath Sisters' ledger. You lay the horn across his parchment until the ink shows its veins. Rent posted, and no quietus without reason, greet his fingers the way water greets ash. He edits himself admirably. Rent regular. Thanks credited, closure not required. The porch appreciates a man who likes correction more than improvisation. Boys who used to hire stools for drama now ask to carry water to the baths. You give them a game, 3 taps on the rail for a full measure, 2 for half, 1 for enough. They call it lids. The sisters call it grace. The beetle, who never learned to enjoy songs without a moral, admits he prefers the rhythm of towels to the cadence of accusations. He keeps his fines book for libel and egg, and his bench stops smelling like mildew. Behind the choir, Magda posts a second slate titled Door Work, Door Bolted, Names Learned, No Force, Witness Heard, Price Measured, Water Allowed. What looks like housekeeping is a treaty. House by house, the sentence becomes door. A client with a purse and a verse tests a latch and learns to admire refusal. A constable's cousin tries to bring half coin and double volume, the door remembers your wood and holds. A bishop's man reads no minors and finds himself older by the only method you respect, a bruise. Rescue sneaks back in penitential colors. A visiting preacher announces holy purifications for women of the lane. You point him to the porch where bans and no anonymous posting live under the same horn. He discovers his mouth likes daylight less than he thought and chooses to carry rosemary to the infirmary instead. The friars who have learned to bless towels hum in a friendly key. The chapter's winter audit turns into a recital of lists that deserve applause. The clerk reads thanks collected with names and verbs, steam kept, linen boiled, vinegar ladled, cups measured, doors bolted, witnesses heard. The crowd claps once like lids. The procurator attempts to stage an augmentation mid-ovation. The sacristan fakes a sneeze and holds the lamp closer. The word melts. Even hypocrites enjoy good minutes. You propose a thing nobody asked for and everybody needed, a quiet room. It is not a confessional. It is a bench with water, 2 towels, a latch, and the porch cards on the walls in smaller handwriting. Complaint without fee, witness heard, charge copied, copies given. Magda uses it when she escorts a frightened woman to the clerk. The clerk uses it when he escorts a woman with a copy to herself. The priest uses it to read thanks between bands, so applause does not need to learn a hymn. You discover that silence can be public without becoming a tax. In the Liberty next door, a newer one, less disciplined, you hang the same cards and discover why thieves love portability. Rate posted stops 3 brawls before the 3rd ladle. Door bolted stops an apology late and a bruise early. No minors gives 2 boys an excuse to pretend to be men in the way you want them to. Clean linen offsends a low illness that loves corners. The beadle there asks for your fines table and your beetle. You sell him both, cheap. You intend to flood this county with furniture. Poets return again with chastened metaphors and a petition. Can they sing in the baths while women wash? The sisters say no. The slate says witness heard. The beadle's daughter asks them to invent a chorus for bowl first at the infirmary instead. They do. They discover they like earning coin without having to aim. The lily ledger stays quiet in the way you always wanted, until a night decides to be otherwise. A winter guest collapses in the lane, and the old hunger for spectacle stretches. You aim wood at it. Witness heard keeps the lane from inventing a vigil. Water allowed keeps helpfulness from turning into hindrance. Door bolted keeps strangers from purchasing grief. Charge copied keeps the clerk from guessing at tomorrow. The surgeon warms 1 bowl. The herb wall provides honey and later comfrey. The bishop's rent book declines to have an opinion. The next day's thanks lists bread, steam, water, and the absence of poetry. The ledger of charges remains shorter than you feared. A canon starts humming that anonymous bills must be let in winter, like drafts through a letter slit. You tack it a narrow card under the bands like a wedge, no anonymous posting. He presses, the nail holds. He coughs himself into adulthood, a habit whose sound you've come to love, and carries towels to the hospital as penance. Saints admire this. The Bath sisters finish their rosemary policy with a small swagger. On feast weeks, 1st hour free for anyone who arrives with a copy of a charge, a retraction, or a thanks. The porch claps as if the town has invented itself. In a sense, it has an mid-lintel, now you, type your 7-word Bath lintel rule and include rosemary if you want the sisters to grin. Water boiled, linen boiled, rosemary steeped, door bolted. Subscribe and tap the bell so Part 6 finds you before a penny psalm tries to sell absolution by the ladle. The Gale door announces a further improvement that should be ordinary and feels brave. Children may be named visitors once copied. It means a boy gets to carry stew. It means love becomes a public fact. It means rumor has to hunt elsewhere. The keeper, who used to savor exceptions, now savors enforcement. He points to chalk and sleeps more. A venerable trickster arrives with licenses from a foreign chancellery allowing quiet meetings with discreet houses. You set horn on his ribbon and press until the wax disc remembers it is only wax. No force, no minors. Rate posted bang into his glove like a hinge. He laughs, pays, leaves coin in thanks, and takes your cards to his employer as if they were souvenirs. That is the second best outcome. The best would have been silence. You walk the loop like a rosary whose prayers are nails, chapter bench, porch rail, beadle's table, bath lintel, gale wicket, hospital wall, the newer Liberty's door. At each you thump wood or stone and watch cards hum. This is the only music you wanted from this quarter. Lists, lids, receipts. The sacristan breathes easier, the clerk enjoys practicing smaller, the beadle naps after being decent. The sisters add 2 more wreaths to bathing doors. Magda counts coins as if counting ribs, a confirmation that they all still live. Then you leave what you always leave, public sentences at hand level, ridiculously portable, stubbornly plain, unafraid of incense. On the porch, no anonymous posting, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given, names learned. By the chapter steps, rent posted, no quietus without reason. On the beadle's bench, slander fined, no bricks. On bath lintels, water boiled, linen boiled, rosemary steep, door bolted, no minors, thanks collected. On the gale, time posted, access for spouse, no ordeal talk, charge copied. On the hospital wall, honey allowed. Behind church walls that thought they provided only mystery, you insisted on hygiene, invoices, doors, subscribe and tap the bell so the sixth part arrives before some winter preacher tries to staple fasting to rent. In the comments, leave the 7-word rule you will actually hammer where hands live. Rent posted, no minors, no force, witness heard, and type continue if you want to finish this lane's build. The steward reading the last audit in the correct key, the beadle forcing rhymers to mop with grace, the clerks who turned quietus into silence rather than tax, and the women who made a room out of a rumor. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the one miracle that has worked in forges, roads, hunts, pillories, and liberties alike, sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths higher appetite. The winter preacher arrives with fasting in his pocket and a ledger in his sleeve, so you set the horn lamp on the chapter step until a warm coin of light lands, where sermons try to invoice. He announces a holy quiet, shops closed, baths cold, doors unlatched for charity, and asks the chapter to staple a surcharge called devotio to the liberty rents until Epiphany. The sacristan holds your lamp higher. You hang counsel at mouth height, where wrists must bruise before religion borrows wages. No closures without reason, rent posted. No quietus without reason. Complaint without fee. Witness heard. Copies given. Thanks collected. Magda, 2 Bath sisters, and the beadle's daughter touch each line in turn. The preacher takes a breath, meets wood, and decides to carry Rosemary to the infirmary instead. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that keeps this lamp honest, not the kind that rings without receipts. And in the comments, write the 7-word winter rule you would nail to any porch. No closures without reason. Rent posted. Thanks collected. I'll pin the ones that make wrists obey before mouths invite hunger. The chapter tries the maneuver sideways. The canon's procurator drafts a circular requiring purity rent from houses that keep steam and water in Advent. You slide the horn's coin across puritas until it looks like augmentation. Rent posted has already taught Magda to point. She reads the posted rate under horn and refuses to pay anything not written. No quietus without reason hangs at the cupboard hinge like a small saint with a hammer. The procurator discovers he likes the feeling of being corrected in public more than he likes the sound of custom. He amends the roll. Rent regular. Thanks credited for vinegar, linen, and bread given. Closure not required. The porch claps once like lids, then buys towels. Behind church walls, the sisters make Rosemary into governance. They add a second slate titled Fasting Etiquette, cups measured, water allowed, baths by the hour, not the hush, witness heard, door bolted, no minors. They nail it chest high, where hands must touch before mouths explain themselves. A pilgrim, eager to rehearse austerity on other people's backs, asks for free confession baths. The slate answers, thanks collected, a coin for the infirmary, a ladle of vinegar for the ward. He discovers generosity costs less than invention. Poets return with snow on their boots and a cold stanza for the lane. They try to sell penance choruses to the crowd. The beadle taps their plank with the beadle, then the fines table. Slander fined, no bricks, egg, groat, and mop. They pivot to a jig for no anonymous posting and a call and response for names learned. Coins arrive without requiring any woman to become a stanza. The beadle tears a scrap from his book and hands it to one boy. A note that says simply, write better or mop. The boy mops, his verses improve. The stool attempts a winter residency. 2 stool fanciers drag it to the bridge and rehearse charity dunkings. You set the horn where the yoke meets pride and hammer 3 cards to wood at hand level. No dunking before reading. Witness heard. Water allowed. The scolds grow bored, which is the sanctified result. Boys tap the crosspiece when the dipper says enough. Girls carry warm cloths to the infirmary. The preacher watches and admits aloud that ritual kneels more gracefully when lists carry the weight. In the back room where quietus once disguised appetite, the clerk now posts the audit table like a psalm. Rent posted. Complaint without fee. witness heard, copies given, no quietus without reason, thanks collected. He reads the line under horn when a chapter cousin whispers that the Liberty should contribute a winter coal, which is to say, pay my brother. The sacristan coughs in the tone that says no and holds the lamp closer. The cousin withdraws. Paper looks honest, which is all anyone ever needed from it. Because you nailed low sentences, women do the one thing that proves reform is real. They add their own. Magda writes no drink bought by threat over the wine shelf. A house 2 doors down pins say stop. Say again by the curtain, a rule that serves more people than it admits. The Bath sisters nail no talk paid above the bench where men used to test eloquence. Now they test temperature. The lane grows a narrow chapel made of wooden towels, heat that is not theater, privacy that can be audited, charity that has a rate. A city watch captain shows up with 8 men, 2 halberds, and an appetite for inspection. He tries to be a riot by announcing himself as an inventory. You meet him with light and doors, not courage. Door bolted stays bolted, while witness heard summons the sacristan, the beadle, and the clerk. Magda produces posted rents, posted rates, and copies given. The watch captain reads. He discovers he prefers being evidence to being exception. He orders his men to buy vinegar for the infirmary and leaves without a single verse being improved at his expense. Across the cloister, a second liberty is a half step behind your grammar. Magda brings them your cards, your wreaths, your children's scroll of verbs, read, copy, name, witness, post, water, and the Bath sisters bring rosemary. Their beadle posts slander find, hunts his first rhyme like a rat, and mops with a friendlier face than the poets expected. The chapter posts rent, posted on their steps. The sacristan pins no anonymous posting beside banns. The Gale hangs time posted and sleeps. That is how a county cures, not through sermons, but by copying. The infirmary keeps your bowl hot and your honey close. The surgeon adds a winter page to the ledger titled Prevented Hymns and writes, Scald averted by lid, burn averted by vinegar, death averted by honey allowed on Sundays. He posts the page at mouth height in the chapel. The prior reads it between psalms. A brother who thought sanctity and chemistry were adversaries goes to buy lids for the priory kitchen. He calls it a pilgrimage and is not entirely wrong. At the porch, the priest adds a little rail shelf labeled copies given so women can pick up their own dignity after the banns. He pins retracted under horn in a hand that no longer trembles. He reads thanks before charges, because gratitude is the town's favorite weather. The beadle's daughter keeps a stack of wreaths and cards for anyone visiting with purpose. A merchant from upriver buys 4 and ties them to a tailboard. He pays with lilies and a promise to post rates. You collect both. The bishop sends a visitor to investigate matters of modesty. He expects to become an episode. He becomes a clerk. No minors. No force bruise his gloves. Rent posted outlives his Latin. Thanks collected persuades him to carry Rosemary to the hospital between interviews. No quietus without reason discovers his pen's humility. He writes you a long letter that confesses nothing and proves everything. You pin it under horn so strangers can bump it. The beadle finds the most disobedient couplet of the season and tames it with a mop. 2 rhymers performing fasting fireworks on the bridge build a crowd with scorn. They watch a 3rd poet, who learned policy earlier, sell verses for the infirmary. His hat fills. There's echo. The beadle tears a page from his book, hands it to them, and points to slander find. They scrub the crosspiece while humming the thanks jig. They add a new stanza about mops. Magda proposes the boldest grace of Advent, a quiet room where people can undo harm without hiring tragedy. You supply the bench, the dipper, the cards, and the rule. Complaint without fee, witness heard, charge copied, copies given. Women use it to bring paper on purpose. Men use it to listen to paper. The beadle uses it to make zeal fold itself under the bench with the pegs. The quiet room becomes the lane's best instrument, a wall that refuses to be a stage. Numbers begin defeating appetite. The steward reads the audit aloud at the chapter table. Posted rent, no quietus, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given, thanks collected, and nobody remembers to look insulted. The sacristan smiles because light did the conversion, not his argument. The canon remarks that the lane has become edifying. Magda rolls her eyes privately and brings him a card to hammer into his own house. No drink bought by threat. He obeys. Public sentences save more souls than private fatigue. The Gale door gives the quarter its favorite announcement. Children may be named visitors once copied. It looks simple. It feels like a new century. Love happens at hand level. Rumor has to find a new job. The keeper posts the rule on the outside as well as the inside, because decency thrives on redundancy. The last quarrel of winter arrives disguised as a hymn. A cantor from a neighboring parish sells indulgence slips that forgive anonymous bills. He sets up beside the banns. You set the horn next to his tray and nail no anonymous posting beneath the board. He reads it, blushes like a small boy, and pockets his slips. The priest whispers that he likes our version of absolution better. Copies given, mid-lintel, now you. Type your 7-word winter porch law exactly as you'd hammer it. No closures without reason, rent posted, thanks collected. Subscribe and tap the bell so the last part lands before spring buries our cards under blossoms. You close the quarter by counting public mercies. Miracles prevented grows 3 lines longer than charges. Thanks earns a second page. Rent posted never fell off the steps. No quietus without reason lost a vowel and thus its nerve. No anonymous posting saved more women than argument ever did. No minors, no force bruised 2 gloves and revised 2 men. Door bolted became the prayer most hands spoke. Water allowed trained boys to carry cups instead of verses. Time posted made the Gale bearable. Honey allowed made Sundays look like policy. Slander fined hired mops. Rosemary steep taught Advent to smell human. You leave what you always leave, sentences at mouth height. Unpoetic, portable, irreverent toward hypocrisy, reverent toward wrists. On the chapter door, rent posted, no quietus without reason. On the bench, complaint without fee, witness heard, copies given. On the rail, slander fined, no bricks. On lintels, rate posted, no minors, no force, door bolted, water allowed. On bath doors, water boiled, linen boiled, rosemary steeped, thanks collected. At the stool, no dunking before reading. At the Gale, time posted. Access for spouse, no ordeal talk, charge copied. Beneath the banns, no anonymous posting, names learned. Behind church walls that once mistook secrecy for sanctity, you fit a village for spring. Subscribe and tap the bell so the final build arrives while your beam still remembers its height. In the comments, leave 2 pieces for the next town and the next child who will carry cups. Your own 7-word winter rule you will actually nail where hands live. No closures without reason, rent posted, thanks collected. And the word continues, so I bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, and the same stubborn miracle that has worked at forges, roads, pillories, kitchens, and lanes, public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths attempt to call appetite holy. The first warm day arrives like a confession the frost cannot keep, so you set the horn lamp on the porch rail until a warm coin of light lands where winter's sentences must decide whether they were habits or merely weather. The band's board smells of beeswax and lists. The Bath sisters' slates shine like pewter. The Beatles' finds table looks suspiciously clean. Magda has tied rosemary to each lintel, the way sailors tie lines to things that matter. You hang counsel at mouth height one more time, not for novelty but for muscle memory. No anonymous posting, complaint without fee, witness heard, charge copied, copies given, rent posted, no quietus without reason, thanks collected. The priest reads banns, then thanks, then steps aside and lets wood do what homilies rarely accomplish. Subscribe and tap the bell, the one that keeps this lamp honest, not the bell that thinks applause is policy. And in the comments, leave your 7-word spring rule. You will actually nail where hands live. No anonymous posting, complaint without fee, thanks collected. I'll pin the rules that smell like rosemary and carry them to the next lane that wants cleanliness to outvote secrecy. The quarter chooses. It chooses by opening doors and keeping the cards, by boiling water before singing, by posting rates before bargaining, by inviting witnesses before rhymes. The Bath sisters add a small bold line under fasting etiquette. First hour free for copies given. And the porch applauds the way it has learned to once like lids. A widow brings her retraction and receives steam. A pilgrim brings his thanks and receives a towel. A bishop's clerk brings a receipt instead of a wink and receives a handshake instead of a story. Soap has become governance. The beetle runs his last experiment on rhyme. He buys 2 from the poets, finds 1 for libel, and manages to make them mop while humming the one that paid for vinegar. He posts the fines table again, not because anyone forgot, but because posted rules are how towns keep decency from relying on elders' personalities. He likes being permanent furniture more than he liked being the part of dramas that wore boots. Magda invents the habit that will outlive all our cards: door blessing. She does not call it that. She simply invites every housemistress and bath sister to hammer her own slate into her own wood with her own hand. Rate posted, door bolted, no minors, no force, water allowed, witness heard, thanks collected. Men stand back and learn what bureaucracy looks like when women write it. The hammering sounds like rain. The chapter's spring audit reads less like a benediction and more like an account book that chose virtue. Rent posted remained posted. No quietus without reason removed 5 invented coins and 3 invented sentences. Complaint without fee filled a desk with paper instead of a square with performance. Witness heard kept the gale honest. Copies given sent women home with dignity. Thanks collected bought towels, vinegar, honey, lids, objects superior to metaphors. The sacristan admits he is greedy for this kind of music. Pilgrims test doors better than preachers do. One arrives with a mind full of innocence and a purse full of hazard. He tries to purchase what no minors and no force refuse. He meets wood and emerges smaller for good reasons. He buys rosemary for the infirmary to compensate for his first idea. Another arrives with brimstone in a ballad. He performs it against your no anonymous posting sign and finds his voice loses its appetite. He purchases copies of No Water Under Oil to take home for his mother. You like this century's inventory. Gal proves itself by becoming a hallway rather than a hole. The keeper keeps chalk, not secrets. He posts time posted at eye height and knuckle height because compassion survives redundancy. He raps no ordeal talk when envy argues for an extra night disguised as caution. He hands charge copied across his own hatch and discovers paper makes him stronger than mutters ever did. 2 children bring stew with their names written on scraps. He reads them like bands. Love gets a schedule, rumor, a famine. The infirmary turns the herb wall into a chapel and refuses to be embarrassed. Honey allowed on Sundays hangs beside clean linen. Water allowed underwrites every bed. Thanks collected turns visitors into people who know their hands are good enough for writing. The prior tells you he has decided he does not need to be against anything that keeps breath in a chest. He looks smaller and happier. It is difficult to dislike honest humility. A rival parish sends an inquisitive letter. They ask whether your rules encourage vice. You pin their letter under horn and answer slowly. No minors is not vice. No force is not vice. Door bolted is not vice. Witness heard is not vice. Clean linen, water allowed are neighbors to all the things you wanted saints to guard. Thanks collected is how towns become grateful. You affix a wreath and the children's scroll. Read, copy, name, witness, post, water, and a note. Pay with lilies or with wood. They steal the cards and pretend they invented them. Perfect. Because you built the low sentences correctly, higher ones can rest. The bishop writes a circular, no quietus without reason, with a sigh that sounds like cedar yielding to measure. The canon's procurator reads rents as if they were psalms. The priest reads bands in a key that keeps saints and lists on speaking terms. The sacristan pins no anonymous posting under the bands before he lights candles. The beadle sleeps. A festival tries one last white heat show by the pitch pits. You have already nailed no children in the circle, pots off fire, sand at hand, lids close to the outer fence. Your cards defeat bravado by being heavy where wrists are. When the pot hisses, lids and ash move. When a boy reaches, his mother bumps no hand on red. The crowd laughs softly at their own restraint. The poet sells a jig about lids. You buy a verse and enjoy it more than you dare to admit. The last temptation arrives sinning as nostalgia. An old man with interesting scars tells 2 boys that Men used to prove themselves in heat. You hand him the bellows liver. Steady teaches him a better proof. He discovers rhythm made him prouder than confession. He says less and carries water. You walk the loop one final time because endings are just the next rehearsal. Chapter steps, porch bench, beadle's table, bath lintels, gale wicket, hospital wall, pit paling. At each you thump wood or stone and listen for the hum that tells you muscle memory has replaced supervision. It answers in different keys. Lids at the baths, mops at the beadle's bench, chalk at the gale, vinegar at the infirmary, sand at the pits, rosemary at Magda's door, paper at the porch. Your lamp's coin of light looks less like an argument and more like a habit. You leave what you always leave when you think you are finished, more cards than you arrived with, and fewer speeches than you promised. On the porch, no anonymous posting, complaint without fee, witness heard, charge copied, copies given, names learned, thanks collected. On the chapter, rent posted, no quietus without reason. On the lane, rate posted, no minors, no force, door bolted, water allowed. On the bath, water boiled, linen boiled, rosemary steeped. On the beadle, slander fined, no bricks. On the gale, time posted, access for spouse, no ordeal talk. On the pit, pots off fire, sand and ash at hand, lids close. On the armory, lugs required, guards tied, aprons wool. On the forge, apron tied, cuffs shut, tongues kept, quench clear. On the steel me shelf, the children's scroll rolled small, cool, honey, ring ash later, wait. And then you do the YouTube thing because our square is not done learning and because it keeps me accountable to your wrists. Subscribe and tap the bell so the next 7-part drill lands while your beam still remembers its height. In the comments, leave 2 gifts for the next parish and the next apprentice. Your own 7-word rule, you will actually nail where hands live, no anonymous posting, complaint without fee, thanks collected, and the next theme title you want hammered into drills under horn. Try one of these, or write the one your street needs. How parish bells outran gossip, why city walls ate generals, what market stalls taught ministers. We'll shoulder horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, a basket of cards, the Beatles' beetle, the Bath sisters' rosemary, Magda's keys, and the miracle this channel keeps proving against 5 different kinds of appetite. Public sentences at mouth height, repeated until wrists remember them before mouths rent skin.